Hello and good evening, and welcome to the new Ciderhouse folk show.
We're going to get the InCider Scoop from a bunch of special guests.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting. It's quite fun, actually. Our first show, or our first series, the InCider sessions, happened during the lockdown. And apologies, it wasn't our plan.
No, when we started working on this show, we were in relatively normal times. But now, as you can see, lockdown has struck. So we are socially distanced in space, actually.
Yes.
Seemed the best thing.
It's the only place we're allowed to meet, actually,
we're
as you can see.
Adequately apart. And also, it does help that we're in a vacuum because the virus finds it harder to travel, I think. It's the theory, isn't it?
Absolutely. I believe, space might be...
It's good. And also, we've got the lights of the spacecraft to be seen by. It's working very well.
Yeah. Excellent.
That aside, we're going to bring you a little bit of music from us that we recorded a couple of weeks ago now.
Yeah.
When it was warm-ish and pleasant.
And we were on Earth.
Yeah.
So, hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't already got copies of our CDs, this is our little merchandise moment. We do have our first album called Untold. Then we have the InCider Sessions album, which was, of course, recorded during the first lockdown.
Yes, by accident, but we definitely recorded it.
There might be something there. You never know what might happen this time. And then we do also have the Words of a Fiddler's Daughter album, recorded with Jessie.
Yeah, with my daughter. Who turned out, I guess it wasn't turning out really, I guess she already was a poet, but...
It's just you finally noticed.
Yeah, I finally noticed. And she did some poetry and we played, and it was actually all remarkably magical, fantastic poems.
So there's a CD and a book. So with Christmas coming, until it's cancelled, there might be some present ideas there, you never know.
Yeah, but you can give people presents even when Christmas is cancelled.
Yeah. And CDs make great drinks mats and bird scarers.
And frisbees,
Christmas tree decorations,
and
I believe.
Books.
Yeah.
Well, there is this panic about bog roll that we all keep going through, so I suppose that's an option. Anyway,
you heard it here first. Anyway.
So, yes, on to our special guest, Steve Knightley of Show of Hands.
You've probably heard of him.
Yeah, you've probably heard of him and it. He was kind enough to agree to talk to us, and we had a little chat.
Well, we're very happy to welcome our very first guest to the Ciderhouse Folk Show, and it is Mr. Steve Knightley. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, guys. How are you doing? I'm very well.
Good, thanks.
It's good to see you.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, mate.
So, thank you very much for joining us and having a little chat with us. It's about the only way we get to meet people in these strange times.
Yeah, it's... it must be a year since I last saw you, Steve, I think.
Would have been, I think the Globe show was last autumn. It was the end of last
roughly.
summer. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's unbelievable when you look at your diary and think, God, was it really that long ago? Blimey. It's all very strange.
Possibly a bit more time yet.
Possibly.
The Tier 3 border this morning has moved within about 10 miles of me, so it's approaching fast.
Whereabouts are you then?
I'm in Nottinghamshire, but my postcode is a DN, Doncaster.
Yeah.
So, mightily close. But, in fact, possibly by the time this video goes out, I could be in full lockdown. Who knows?
So I was asking my family what they thought would be interesting questions, and Spike
That's usually
said...
destined for failure, I would say.
It is, but they did quite well this time. But one of them was... what do you find hardest about performing? Well, at the moment, probably getting in front of an audience. But that aside, is there a thing you find hardest about performing?
Do you mean generally, or pre-COVID, or now?
I think it was. I think the question meant generally. If once you've actually got on a stage, what's the thing that?
Let's pretend COVID doesn't exist. Maybe that's
at least for a few minutes.
Well, I don't particularly get stage fright. Because I only get nervous when we're not in the hands of good technicians, and as you know, we use good guys, so that side of it is taken. So, no, the hardest thing, to be honest, is probably not even hard. The tedious thing is the travel. Even that's not too bad because we don't tend to travel in rush hour times. But when it's a 12 o'clock departure from Devon and you're driving to Stoke, nothing against Stoke, but that is a bit of a tedious 2 hours of your life, really. But apart from that, the actual being on the road, we've reached a level where it's a pretty pleasurable experience, and we have some very, very good people doing some very, very good work on our behalf. And to be honest, it's those guys at the moment and girls that I feel the most for, the technical people who
absolutely.
never got the big applause to start with that we got. So yeah, it's the technicians at the moment I feel are suffering the most.
Yeah, the other area I find challenging, and I'd imagine for you it's worse than ever, because sound checking, usually headline acts are sound checked first and then you sound check in reverse order so that the engineer hasn't too much. So the amount of time you must have to fill between your sound check and going on finally at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, those hours must be difficult to fill.
Well, Adam would have said, we are very good at sound checking. We don't fanny about. If you're rehearsing, you shouldn't be sound checking. It's not a time for rehearsal.
Yeah.
Is it working? Bugger off. That's all you need to know. Is it working? Bugger off. And in the early days, we have watched some people like Kappa Cayley rehearse literally till 5 minutes before a marquee is opened. And that's as much an exercise in power as it is a technical thing. We determined we would never be like that. So really it's like, and we have a routine. I go on, voice, instrument, other instruments, I leave. Phil goes on, voice, instrument, he leaves. Miranda goes on, Cormac goes on, we all come on, we do the same piece of music for about 3 minutes, and then anything anybody wants to hear from last night, technically, no, good, bugger off.
Yeah, that's on the road, which because Cormac and I did a little support for Show of Hands, so we toured with them a little bit. So I've seen that happen on the road, in and out, done, and then the support act came on, in and out, done. The whole thing took no time at all. But that must be different at a big festival.
Yeah, well, at a big festival, often it's just a line check. It's just literally, is it working? Even quicker, bugger off. And some festivals can be a problem because there could be a room full of people, and we don't particularly mind, but some artists can get quite touchy if there's people there. Well, things aren't working, and usually at a festival, if you've got a good stage manager, you're given your allotted spot and that's it. But although if people overrun, if the concert is overrun, we will take the time that we're given if we need it. So, but normally that's down to good stage management. And so far, things do get better all the time on that scene. You remember that festival scene we used to have?
Yeah, somewhere in the back of my memory, absolutely.
We did a festival, Murray and I.
Yes.
We actually did a festival this year. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
With everybody in little...
2020.
There were white bubbles drawn on the ground for people to be in, separated, and it actually was all very civilised. You did a couple of things, didn't you? Different kind of way.
We did a driving gig, and we've done a couple of socially distant gigs. It's not a substitute, but at least it's something. No. But the original question is, if we've done our job, then we do have time to fill, which luckily with the internet and with dressing rooms, that is, as long as you're not tempted to graze or to drink too much, and we tend to be pretty good at that. Then it's time to really do all your sort of office work, really,
I know, that is such a beauty of the internet and being able to do emails on the phone and stuff. I remember when I used to tour and you'd get back before that became so easy, and the last couple of hours driving home, you'd just have this sinking feeling in your stomach of all the things you still had to organise. Well, that's gone. You get it done on the road, which is nice. You said it's not a substitute like doing the driving gigs. I guess you just don't get audience feedback in the same way.
No, it's the online gigs are very, very different. You have to adopt a different mindset. And I've seen people, I think, get it wrong. You can't do gigs at your phone.
No,
I've seen people stand in a distance behind speakers with monitors and do like the big gig with the same introductions and the same pattern. It's not the same, really. My attitude is that rather than an audience coming into your space that they do live, you're going into their space. So I think, imagine you're sitting next to people on their settees or on their sofas or whatever, telling them a story and singing them a song. So that's the way I sort of tend to approach it. And occasionally you tend to ramble on and get a bit confessional and sort of like talk too much because you're having a chat. And the other thing you don't get is that time to reset after a piece of music.
Yeah,
you don't get the applause.
Yeah.
And like I've done, there's a new song, a sort of lockdown ballad, and I played it one night to a small group online, and I didn't know what to say. I was just like, I was so lost in it. I didn't get a chance to press the reset button. So it was like, it is very different, a different type of stagecraft, but it is a stagecraft you need. And I think people want intimacy, they want maybe insights they don't normally get, and they just want to be just spoken to in a different way. But I've seen some people do the big gestures, almost like, let me see your hands. It's like, no.
Hello, somebody's living room.
Don't do it.
It doesn't quite work.
I suppose you have to work harder in a way to keep people, because if you're just in somebody's living room, the moment you're boring or pointless, they can just flip away to something else.
They probably do. They can go out for a cup of tea. They can sit and drink a bit more. And the other thing is, you don't have to build a set with the same arc. You build down a bit and then to the conclusion of it. You can just finish at any sort of point in that graph and say, okay, we're going to have a break now and I'll see you in a minute. And I always tend to follow my shows with an online Zoom meet and greet. So those that want to have a chat, about 10 minutes later, I'll even go and get changed and try and make it analogous to a gig and just chat to the people that want to hang around afterwards. And it seems to work quite well, and I make that part of the packaging. Here's an online show and there's a meet and greet afterwards, and I tend to do it through YouTube Live, which I found is the most reliable platform. What I do is I do an unlisted YouTube link, and I send them the link on the day, and if they want to send it to their friends, I don't mind. They're only sharing the good news, and so I'll just send the link around on the day. And generally, I found that to be the best platform, because they can save it to watch later and then watch on their smart TVs, which for me is the holy grail. You want them sitting and watching you on a big screen with good sound. So YouTube, so far, I noticed the world and his wife building platforms and barriers and streaming. Everybody's getting into it. I'm not sure it's not all going to end in tears in a way, but it is a strategy for all those people that not used to live off us, but were the intermediaries, the agents and managers. They're all thinking, look, there's the artist over there and there's the internet. I have to desperately stand between them and stop them connecting without monetizing through me,
Back to the days of which we all hope will come again. And this thing about place is interesting, talking about we're now going into people's rooms, but place, to me, do you think it can make a big difference to the performance, to the feel of the performance? Like, what place has been most, rewarding to gig in?
I think there's a certain set of preconditions that help an audience become itself. And you can see that if a room's too dead, straight away they're only going to hear the people in their immediate vicinity clapping and applauding and laughing. So they don't get that sense of a collective audience. If it's too ambient, then obviously there's too much resonance and white noise, and so you need a balance of live and dead. You don't want the place to be too warm. I always say you can warm an audience up, you can't cool them down, because if they're starting to get like that about 10:30, so there are certain structural situations that are working in your favour. If the stage isn't too high, if you're in the room, if there's a bit of life, if they're aware that they're in a good crowd, then you've got things working for you that otherwise can be working against you. So and the best venues now are built with that in mind. There's not too much spillage from the stage lights. They're in a sort of darkness, and they do feel like they're part of a collective. That's what those lovely old music halls, for example, you can't beat that. When people are sitting in the stalls and they're aware that there's people all around them like that. I think they're some of my favourite venues, like the Theatre Royals and in Margate and Plymouth, and there's a good few in the country.
So if you had the choice now that on January the 1st, not that we wish to think about that date too much, but on January the 1st, you are allowed your first gig back, first proper physical, massed crowd, all the rest of it. where would that gig be? Do you have an absolute, that's the one venue I would really choose?
Probably the Union Chapel.
Oh yeah.
No, it's not great sound, but often an audience hears through its eyes. They can sometimes come into a cathedral. They're not having great sound particularly, but the whole ambience of the room informs the way that they listen. And so the Union Chapel is that it's lively. They feel like a crowd straight away. We always get a good crowd in there. And the texture and the detail is part of the show. And we might slow some things down and take a bit of the percussion out of the set to make it a bit easier. But places like the Union Chapel are great, and you can always go to the front of the stage and do something acoustically, and people think it's magic. They think, they don't quite know what's just happened, So probably the Union Chapel, because it would be a big London gig, and dare I say, a slightly younger demographic in the audience, so you feel like it's more mainstream in a funny sort of way.
No, I did a gig there, and I've only actually played there once, but it was a very different feel to anywhere else. I think some of our music was a bit too fast for the acoustic.
Adam, you playing too fast? My goodness,
maybe a little bit.
I can't imagine that.
So, the audience feedback, Steve.
Yeah.
I did a bunch of gigs with Caro Emerald, who's a big multi-platinum selling Dutch superstar. We did the O2 and that kind of stuff, and the massive audiences. But because we had in-ear monitors and that kind of stuff, I never really got any particular feel from the audience, and so the gig could feel very kind of dry and uninvolved. Is that side of things important to you, to get a feel back from the audience while you're playing?
After years and years of being nagged by sound engineers, I've gone over to in-ear monitors now. And it's a very, very different experience in a way, because what you end up doing is the show, and you do the show at them, and you trust that reaction is what you hope it will be, and it works really, really well, because there's a bit more intimacy in the singing and the detail, and you can hear the rest of the musicians better. And you do the one-liners, and you don't have to think, are they laughing? Okay, I need another one, or we need to change direction. So you're not reacting to the audience in the same way. But I've done so many years of constantly with my antenna out, trying to change and manipulate and change the set, much to the annoyance of people that had pre-programmed all the lights and all the effects and all that sort of thing. So they're delighted. Now we do the show. Once we got the show up and going last year with Cormac and Miranda, it is the show that they get. So in a way it's slightly more detached, but it does reach another level that you do get with, dare I say, sort of international artists. When you see them do their show, you know that it's sort of a bit like the night before, but it is relentlessly of a certain standard. So, whereas before I might be a bit too guilty of not manipulating. I might be thinking, we need a funny one, we need this, okay, we need to change tempo, whatever. So now it's not negotiable. So good things and bad things, really.
Yeah, no, I've certainly found they've saved me so much hassle from clarity. Quite often my job as the accordionist is reactive to the singer or the soloist. So my really hearing the rhythms, really getting it tight, that is so much better with IMs. It really is.
I've got my 2 boxes here of Ultimate Ears, and the only thing I find, they are so well moulded that as you speak they get drawn into your ear and you're totally immersed. So I've had to put little tiny bits of Velcro just to stop them going all the way in, just to let some of them in. These were made from proper moulds.
Yeah, I've got the moulded ones, but then somehow between spending however much on them and now, I've changed shape.
Well, what I recommend is
bloody uncomfortable.
As I say, these tiny.
I need to do something about it.
It's very, very tiny. I don't know if you can see that there. Little bits of very fluffy Velcro. And that is just enough to let some of the air in and not totally seal it up. So that worked, that's worked really, really well. Sorry for you people who have no interest in that whatsoever.
I haven't dared try it. I know there are some of the IM makers are now providing a live function, which I think is leaking a bit of out. Basically, it's got a mic on stage that it then feeds into your IM feed or something.
Yeah, well, we have
constantly playing.
No, we have two mics. We have two ambient mics to pick up the room.
Yeah.
And we can have that fed in. But the latest ones have got GPS in as well. So that as you turn your...
In case you fall off stage.
No, as you turn your head, so the other people in the band's sound is like in a stereo spectrum.
Oh wow!
So as I turn towards Phil, it becomes part of... Yeah. So that's really hardcore.
Talking of flights of fancy, as it were, one of the questions that Adam's family came up with, which intrigued me, I thought it was a good question, was if money and, more importantly, reality was no object, what would be the project that you would come up with? So anything, flight of fancy moment. If you want to do a gig on Mars, yep, that's fine. If you could have anything, what would you do?
I think the GPS on the in-ears will work on Mars.
I would probably... I've had such an amazing time lately doing these landscape and music films. We've done two. We've done one in Abbotsbury Tropical Gardens, and we've done one at this lovely Indian palace in the Cotswolds. It's recorded purely acoustically. There's no effects, everything is live, and you have to go to different parts of a location and find material that fits in that particular space. And what happens is that it takes away the ego from the music, because much of what people experience is the cutaways, it's the setting. So I would love to go to other places. We've got something where we're in India from the Taj Mahal, but I would love to go to some of the most incredible buildings in the world and record a series of concerts, not to an audience, but just acoustically in different settings. That would be great.
It's really interesting because we're just about to do projects not dissimilar actually. It's
100 miles from that. No.
Yeah, up in Yorkshire in a kind of ruined ironstone industrial area. And well, we were improvising, but basically it'll be in those locations, filmed outdoors with proper filming and drone and all that kind of stuff, and us kind of trying to channel the music from that place, make it fit the place, and that's what we're suddenly inspired by as well. So surprisingly similar in a way.
And I think at the moment people are needing content. I think they want content. And I don't think it's enough for people to, here's a bunch of my new songs. Aren't they great, folks? Yeah, and you're competing with Netflix and with YouTube. You're competing with all those other visual media. So I don't think it's, here's a great new song of mine. Don't you really like it? Well, it's all right, but next.
So how does it actually feel not doing live gigs at the moment?
Do you know, I'm not even thinking about it at the moment. I've just got a different hat on. I've just told myself that there's a period of time where I'm doing something else, and given the constraints of that, I'm actually rather enjoying it. Though it has to be said.
Yeah, so are we actually. I was going to ask if you got any interesting stuff coming up or planned.
Well, we're going to do a midwinter solstice sing around in a big barn.
That sounds cool.
With Jeff Lakeman and with Jim Causley. It's going to be a West Country, like a midwinter solstice. We've got this medieval barn nearby. Again, purely acoustic, going to be firelit. It's going to look medieval.
Oh, lovely.
And we're going to have a sing-around with an invited family and friends. It will end up being edited like a gig, but it will be episodic. We'll stop and start. We'll reseat everybody, and we'll sing each other's songs, and we'll put that out on the midwinter solstice in December. Again, on a donation basis. if you like it,
Yeah.
send us some money. As you know, I'm trying to set up the next thing, which is with you and Kirsty and with Michael Wood for a location. I'm desperately looking for locations for our Songs of the People show.
Yeah, that
I'm
would be
waiting to
fantastic
hear
if it
back.
ever
Waiting to
comes
hear
to
back
it.
from the Globe, but unfortunately our lovely contact there has been made redundant.
That's not
Matilda.
so good.
So we need like a industrial museum or somewhere indoors where the ambience reflects the material. Probably
So
a
actually,
museum. A museum of some
I mean,
sort.
I know what this is. Murray slightly might, because I've mentioned it, but people watching this probably won't. So maybe just say what the project is a bit.
Well, what it is that the historian Michael Wood and I put together a repertoire of songs of English protest going way back to the Peasants' Revolt and all the way up to beginning of the Second World War. And Michael would recite prose and text and put these songs. And then originally I did the show with him, and then Adam and Kirsty joined us, and it was almost busked, almost winging it, but we were providing the songs and the setting for this very charismatic historian who's so passionate about his subject to actually talk about the setting for the Tolpuddle
it was
all
quite-
the way.
it
And
was
it
quite
worked
magical,
really well.
actually.
And it's absolutely made for a venue with different locations. So that's what we're looking at, yeah.
There's one question that I think we might try and ask all our guests.
Oh.
Do I believe in, yeah.
It's not difficult. Well, it may be difficult, actually. It's just, how do you see what you do fitting in the folk tradition? Or don't you? Or
We've always been a bit of an uncomfortable mix, really. The traditional element of the folk scene has regarded us with a bit of suspicion, as if we're passing through. Maybe they were right. Maybe they thought that we were on our way to being something beyond it. We play acoustic instruments. It's narrative songs. It's got all the boxes that call it folk. But in some ways, there are rock elements. There's Roots and Springsteen and Dylan and all that sort of thing. So we've never been really embraced by the hardcore folk scene. Sometimes I think we're too slick and too polished. Maybe we're too self-reliant. We don't need their agents. We don't need the journalists. We've won one or two awards. It's not been particularly inundated. There are. I've lost count of the numbers of folk award winners who used to sit in reverence at our feet thinking we were the bee's knees, who, when asked who influenced them, had this incredible attack of amnesia. But, it's just the way it is. We are where we are. I think we're becoming a bit more embraced by the folk scene, but generally it's been a slightly uncomfortable fit. But that's what we're called. There's no other word that seems to be able to encapsulate it. No,
and it does come, the things from which folk music have grown are very much the things your music grows from. I mean, Cousin Jack is a prime example of something that's, straight from people, the land, all that kind of stuff.
It's history, its place, its location. But again, what is an ethnic English sound? What type of instrument determines Englishness?
Absolutely.
It's so.
And does it even need to? Is the other question.
but everyone else, from river dance all the way over to Cajun music, to flamenco, to salsa, to even in the Indian tradition, there are instruments that define the place. But what's an Englishness sound like? It's not like we're part of this wedge of bands playing in a certain genre. Like in the way that you do have reggae or blues or ragtime. We do what we do, and we plunder lots of other traditions, and it's sort of a bit out there on its own. It's a strength and it's a weakness, but it is what it is, and we rely on people bringing their friends along, having assured them it's not that folky.
Folky can be different things to different people, can't it?
Absolutely.
Sometimes very positive.
We've had this Yeah, we've had this debate many a times when you're trying to come up with a marketing tagline and so on. The conversation over whether we should use the word folk.
Ours was world music from the West Country. That was what we used.
I like it.
That's what we used for word. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. No, nothing means anything in the end until you actually listen to the music itself and decide if you like it.
It's like food. You can't describe a meal. You cannot talk someone into liking something by laying out a series of arguments. You taste it and you like it or you don't. And that's just the way it is.
No, we went along and we did the Beardy Festival with our basically entirely improvised set, with no idea whether people were going to find that a good thing or a bad thing, because we hadn't actually done that approach in gigs before, really. And it went down a storm, but we just couldn't have guessed whether it would or not. And can you imagine saying to people, well, just come along, we're just going to make it up on the spot? It's easy for that to be pretty negative.
It sounds like a bit of a cop-out, really. In other words, we're going to turn up, we haven't prepared, we haven't learnt any tunes, we haven't got a set list, we don't really know what we're about to play.
No, Murray wouldn't be able to remember them anyway.
Well, no, and Adam would certainly forget to bring the set list, that's certainly true. Or a violin, probably, knowing Adam.
Yes.
That has happened.
Oh God! The last time it happened, Steve. Yes, it did.
I just think.
Do you remember the Ludlow gig, Steve?
Oh yes.
Where I completely missed what was meant to be our sound check because I was half an hour from Ludlow when my wife Catherine phoned and said, "Is your violin supposed to be sitting by the front door?" At which point I started driving fast back for Derbyshire and she drove fast towards Ludlow. And then our sound check, because you guys were so professional about it, all just slipped in neatly and nicely. Very close before the gig.
But that was an amazing venue. I remember that well.
It was.
Absolutely beautiful church. Yeah.
Wasn't that where there was some problem in the pub?
There was a bit of there was a bit of what you're doing in our local, you long-haired puss, which you don't expect in a middle-class market town like Ludlow, but it was. Yeah, there was a bit of glaring, particularly with my friend Matt Clifford, who's a bit of a... I'm sorry, gentlemen, am I possibly disturbing your hostelry? He does sort of play the...
Could I have a pint of your finest?
Yeah, he does a bit of that, a bit of toughness.
Yeah.
The biggest one I ever had of that was on tour in Italy, and the fellow people I had with me, so it was myself and a Scotsman, and 2 Japanese people and somebody from Vietnam. And it was great, it was a lovely tour. And then we were in the middle of nowhere, really rural Italy, and we'd been recommended this little restaurant for lunch. And it was fabulous, it was well worth it. But when we walked through the door, oh my goodness, it was like a western. Could just see the tumbleweed. Every local bloke was sitting in this restaurant, and every head swiveled round, and it took a while before conversation started again. It was quite an experience.
Yes. Yeah. I had that in the Czech Republic. I can't remember which city we were in, but I walked into what turned out to be the local mafia meeting.
Oh dear.
That was extremely uncomfortable, and I was escorted away for a considerable distance, feeling most nervous.
Dear. Well, that probably brings us actually to the last slightly tongue-in-cheek question for you, Steve, which I'm sure you've answered this one before, but what has been your worst experience in your performing career? Is there something that just sticks in your head as, oh no, that one, I wish I could forget that one?
There's a couple. Do you mind a couple?
No, couple's lovely. Two's great, absolutely.
In the early days, when I wanted to be a rock and roll star, I was living in Brighton, and I'd put a lineup together of a couple of London guys, an Australian guy. He was in publishing, but he'd always wanted to be in a band, Neil. And we were playing, it was the era sort of the Police, late 70s, early 80s, stripy blazers look and little ties, that sort of look. And I was playing to about 30 friends in Brighton, and 2 hardcore bikers turned up. And they sat in the very, very front, and it was a very low stage, and they both put their boots on the front of the stage. And the guy was going, rock and roll, what's some rock and roll? And it was all my songs, you know, very sort of cross between Dire Straits and Squeeze sort of stuff. He said, rock and roll. And then the drummer, who was a bit aggressive, was going, no. He was sort of like looking behind me, Gus, sort of telling them where to go. And so one of them did this thing I've never seen before. From a sheath in the back of his neck, he pulled out a very, very long blade. Very, very long blade. And he went, I've told you once. And it's like, so the bass player went straight into this Chuck Berry medley. And then the guy, he sort of went like that. And he went like that. But the drummer was saying, fuck off, nah. And I was going, Gus. And I was trying to mediate between the psycho drummer and that was a moment. It was like, I felt sort of slightly like watching a snake, that sickening feeling of seeing someone sitting there with, you know, with a very long sort of like sheath knife. So that was early days. And the other one, we were doing a very, very, very posh middle-class festival in Germany in a castle. And they had devoted more resources into looking after the bands backstage, almost as much to the audience. You know, there was a couple of stages in the lovely lawns of a castle. Yeah. So we were told to get there at midday. We got there at about 10:30. We were assigned a band handy. I am your band handy, which is like a German Fraulein. It was very lovely, whose job it was to look after our every alcoholic and culinary needs. So we were sitting at these lovely tables and chairs on the lawns, and then the Levelers tour bus arrived at about 10:30, maybe just before 11, and Mark came staggering down the stairs, and I knew him reasonably well, and so I thought I'd spend the day with them. Which basically meant spending the day drinking. And so we started on the German sparkling wine at about 11, and then all the way through the afternoon. Then we went off, it was the World Cup, so we went off to see a World Cup match in someone's bar who had a whiskey cellar. And then at about 10 o'clock I had to do the gig. And it wasn't that I was drunk so much as I'd lost my complete instinct of how to entertain. Come on, everybody, sing! What's wrong with you? I was charmless and boorish and unfunny. And what's the matter? You know, it's like, you're going to love this one. And Phil and Miranda were looking at me like, what the hell? And I was numb. All of my instincts were completely numb as how to play a festival gig. And it was almost like, yeah, das ist Show of Hands, das ist eine Folkgruppe auf Angleder. And it's like get off, really. And then I went and saw the Levs. I saw them. They were doing an acoustic set.
Yeah, it's not great.
They were out of their brains. They were out of their brains, but they were absolutely brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant because they're used to it. It's what they do. And Mark said, he said to me lately, he said, not going to do that again, are you? I said, no, I'm not going to do that again. It's like I was in the...
Mistakes can be made.
I was in the big boys' playground. So, yeah.
Hey, well, I think we've probably all got a story of something.
We certainly all have stories.
That route. Yeah. Hey ho. Anyway, we could keep talking probably for the next 3 days, but I know we've all got other things to be going on with. So I'd like to say thank you so much, Steve. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit here and chat with you for a bit.
Good. Do you want to hear a song?
Oh,
yeah,
come on then. Yeah, that'd be lovely.
All right, this is a preview. I'm doing an evening of Bob Dylan songs in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm just going through my Bob Dylan repertoire to figure out which songs I can add to the list, you know. So I've never sung this one before, but I'll do this one. May God bless and keep you always. May your wishes all come true. May you always do for others and let others do for you. May you build a ladder to the stars and climb on every rung. And may you stay forever young. May you grow up to be righteous. May you grow up to be true. May you always know the truth and see the light surrounding you. May you always be courageous, stand upright and be strong. And may you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young. May your hands always be busy. May your feet always be swift. May you have a strong foundation when the winds of change shift. May your heart always be youthful. May your song always be sung. And may you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young. Forever young. Forever young. May you stay forever young.
Well, that was fun. I was excited for a moment. I know I poo-pooed Steve's idea that GPS would work on Mars. I know it was your idea, wasn't it? Typical. But I thought it was worth trying. I just had this theory that we could have our in-ears, and once we were out here in near-Earth orbit, we might be able to navigate back to Earth successfully using the GPS.
No.
The whole idea was bollocks.
Just doesn't work.
Doesn't
all I
work.
keep picking up is Radio Saturn. It's just, it's not working well at all.
Yes.
Hey-ho.
We'll be back next week.
Yes, we have a special guest next week, and that is going to be the wonderful Mr. Paul Sartin.
So it is, yes.
From Faustus, Bellowhead, and all sorts of things. So make sure to tune in next Tuesday at 8:30. But before that, we have another idea.
Yes, cunning new plan. It's the Midnight Cider. Now, Murray,
Something we quite often might admit to partaking
Yes.
of.
possibly, and post-midnight and pre-midnight, but that's not the point. So, it comes to the end of the week. It's always challenging times at the moment. Probably it always seems to be this year. Something soothing and lovely before you go to bed, or depending how your weeks work, it could be the beginning. There's one of the Space Goblins. Did you hear that?
I did hear that.
Extraordinary. Yeah, it could be early Monday morning.
Yeah.
So,
Of course, quite intriguing, though, for us
Yeah.
in space.
is it morning?
What time is it?
Well,
I mean,
never-
I'm completely confused now.
Well, I've mostly been confused. So it's not really a change for me,
Yes.
actually.
So, yes, Sunday night, Monday morning, midnight, at the change from Sunday to Monday. I think that's covered it.
That's covered it.
Join us for a Midnight Cider.
Little bit of nice music, hopefully. I mean, Murray will be playing, but other than that, it's fine. Yes, so that should be good
That
night.
was the good news.
Good night from us. There might be a few words now, I'm afraid, and with apologies from both of us. Jeremy Bird felt it necessary to make his presence known and comment for us all.
Well, it is all just discrimination against chickens. Why can't I be in space? I could remarkable plan of picking holes in the Earth's atmosphere so that the sun could get through to power people's computers without the energy being absorbed by too many air particles on the way. And why can't I interview Steve Knightley? My questions would be much more interesting than silly Adam and Murray. I would ask him about his opinions on chickens' rights and whether he agrees that chickens should be in the Olympics, and whether he agrees that I would be much better at being President of America than silly Mr. Trump or the one with teeth, and whether he would write a song for my presidential campaign for next time I could be the first chicken president, and fight against anti-chicken discrimination from a dominant position on the world stage. And then I could be Prime Minister here too, if Steve wrote me another song, and fight for the right for chickens to be chlorinated. Chickens were going to be allowed to be chlorinated, but now we are not. People can be chlorinated in swimming pools. I love swimming in pools. So why can't I be chlorinated too? You see? Vote Jeremy Bad. Vote Jeremy Bad. Chickens in charge. 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 Chickens in charge.